I like to tell people that I was lieutenant governor for 8 years, so I'm used to being ignored. It's okay. And most importantly, why every election matters. And while you may think that, well, this is an off year, it really isn't. All you have to do is look at your blue sheet. Know that you have 4 candidates, 4 Democratic candidates for commissioner. That's got to be some kind of a record for Lebanon County, huh?
It might well be.
Yeah, and it's as important who you elect at the commissioner level, and the school board level, and the township supervisor level. You know, you hear so much about trickle-down economics theory. In my view, in politics, it's really about trickle-up. The better organized you are at the local levels, the more likely it is that you're going to be successful in electing state representatives, state senators, governors, presidents. So I commend this, and I think this kind of exchange is very important to the process of the importance of every single vote and the implications that it has. If you recall, just a few short years ago, Bush versus Gore. In the year 2000, folks, the reality is that Al Gore won the popular vote in the country. And the other reality is that the voting in Florida was interrupted by a number of aberrations. Remember the hanging chads and people closing election places and things like that. The upshot of it was that Al Gore came 537 votes less than George Bush in Florida. A lesson that I learned from none other than United States Senator Rick Santorum at the time. I'll never forget this. We were right in the throes of the confusion following the presidential election of 2000, and we were in New York together at an event, and I bumped into Rick and I said, you know, it just doesn't feel right to me. We didn't count all those votes in Florida. Al Gore actually won the popular vote, and yet we seem to be going through all these gyrations. And he said, Mark, don't you get it? The Supreme Court is 5-4. 5 Republicans, 4 Democrats. They are going to elect the next president of the United States. It was a stunning and completely accurate statement. And in fact, that's what happened. There was a frenzy of legal activity, as you recall, found its way to the Supreme Court, and by a vote of 5-4, Bush versus Gore, Bush wins and became the President of the United States, with all of the implications that that had for the next 8 years. And I leave it to you to think about that, think what transpired, and maybe think what might have been. Here's the point about that. Number one, elections have consequences.
They do.
And every election matters. Number two, every single vote counts. It's kind of interesting that I would use that phrase because when I first ran for the state senate in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, that was our slogan. It happened to be my name, so it coincided nicely. We had little buttons printed up that said every single vote counts. And every one of our volunteers, and every time I opened my mouth, we said that phrase. So much so that before the end of the election, the opponent started saying it. Caught himself in a couple of debates saying, yeah, you know, every single vote counts. And I considered it an endorsement. But it is true, given our experience in 2000. Here's a couple of other ones, just to kind of drive the point home. 1974, the United States Senate election in New Hampshire. 2 candidates, Wyman versus Durkin. Durkin wins by 2 votes. 2 votes. The U.S. congressional election in Indiana, 1984, McIntyre versus McCloskey. I don't even know who won, but the winner won by 4 votes in a congressional district. Montana House of Representatives, 2004, Wyndham versus somebody named Jor. I believe Wyndham won that by a whopping 2 votes. In the Alaska House of Representatives in 2008, Kelly versus Castle, a 1-vote difference decided it. And in the Iowa presidential caucuses we're talking about, Santorum got his boost and was able to inject himself into the entire presidential debate by winning by 34 votes. 34 votes was the difference between him running for president or fading back into obscurity. So it matters. And there's another point to be made here. The courts matter. In addition to your local elections, your county commissioners' elections, in addition to all the other activities that are happening in 2015, know this, that the Pennsylvania Supreme Court affects you, whether you know it or not.